Greetings, global gardeners. It's great to see you here on a Monday. Shout out to Macedonia, Greece, and of course, all of our friends in Australia and Canada and the UK. Let's talk about gardening. This is just such a great time of year. I can still get out, enjoy the days. Of course, the nights are getting a little bit cooler. But for those of us in fall in particular, and even for those of you in spring, this is a good time to start thinking about expanding your garden. Or if you're a new gardener, creating your garden or new garden areas. And when we do that, when we start some of that planning and the preparation to expand and build, how much does it cost? So much of what we do in gardening can be hindered by our budget. Well, over the course of the next 90 minutes on today's show, I'll be talking about what the actual costs really are and whether they're even necessary. And then, of course, try to give you tips along the way to save money because we all like saving money when it comes to gardening. First off, let's answer the basic question. Is it worth it? Is the money we put into gardening worth the expense? And I think pretty much all of us are going to agree, yes, it is. We just have to determine at what point is it too much to spend? What is our threshold? And all of us have our individual thresholds of how much we're willing to pay. And it's not just money. A lot of the focus today, of course, will be talking about the specific costs of gardening as it's related to money. But there's also a time component and there's a labor component. So when we talk about the cost of gardening, it goes beyond just what comes out of our wallet. It's what we're physically able to do and what we have time in our day to do. So I'm looking forward to your comments and your questions as we proceed. And of course, as we cover these different topics, give us your tips. What do you do to save money, to save time, to save your labor? Now, let's talk about the spectrum of costs. And let's begin with a no cost garden. Yes, you can have a garden and it won't cost you anything. If you happen to live in an area where your soil is good and you can grow in it without having to worry about a lot of labor to amend it, you don't have to buy any of those special ingredients to get the soil going. You can start growing in the ground right away. And if you have a library that actually has a seed bank and you can check out seeds for free, it won't cost anything to put those seeds in the ground. If you've got friends who are willing to save and share their seeds, it won't cost anything. So much of what I show and what a lot of other YouTubers show in our videos are things that cost. You know, we've got our raised beds and we've got our tools, and we've got all the stuff that we show how we garden, and that often does involve an expense, but you don't have to do it that way. Not just the way that many of us have chosen to do it. So if you are limited in your budget and you want to garden, start thinking that way. Try to garden with what you already have. And you may have to have some patience. If your soil isn't good, like my soil here in Colorado is terrible, well, I could grow in my soil eventually. I could take the leaves that fall from the trees. I can take the grass clippings that I collect from my neighbors who have a lawn. I can add those together and I could make compost. And I can use that compost to then amend my soil and make my soil better so that it can support the growth of a vegetable garden. That takes time. In a year, I could have the compost, I could have it in the ground, and next year I could grow at no cost other than the time and the expense to make it happen. Not all of us have that kind of patience. And so the next step up is to actually build a bed of some type. Now, I love my raised beds. You know that. I wrote a book about gardening and raised beds. That's how much I like my raised beds. Raised beds can begin by just mounding your soil, raising a good soil above the ground level, and you've got a raised bed, a mound that you can grow in. I like to have the structure. I like to have a rectangular structure for lots of reasons, for the planning, for the work. There's lots of things that we can do in a raised bed, and that's my preferred method. If that's the approach that you want to think about doing, then yes, there is a cost associated with it. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this today, because I had the idea and I started doing a little bit of search. And if you do a Google search for how much it costs to garden, the AI will tell you that you can expect to spend $25 to $50 per square foot to have a raised bed. Well, that's just ridiculous. And I found the actual site that those numbers came from. And that's all AI does, is it just mines the internet for information. And if the website has faulty information and the AI grabs onto it, then that's what's being passed around. So I suspect there are gardeners out there that are interested in raised bed gardening, and they do a search and they see how much it's going to cost, and that turns them off completely. Once I saw that, it's like, I got to talk to you guys. I got to get the information out there for the reality of how much it costs to grow in a raised bed, because I've been growing in raised beds for years and years and years. So here in the US, if you were to go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy the basic lumber and nail it or screw it together to make a raised bed, you could build a bed that's 15 inches high for less than $100. And that would be a bed that's 4 feet wide and 8 feet long. So 32 square feet. For math, let's just call it 30 square feet. So for 30 square feet, you can actually build a medium high raised bed for just over $3 per square foot. Nowhere near $25 or $50 for a DIY project. Where most of the expense comes in, and I've made a bunch of videos on this, is what you put in the raised bed. If you're starting with a pretty good soil and you can add compost that you make yourself, then the cost to fill your bed is nothing, especially if you fill the lower portion of the bed with logs and branches and wood chips like I do. So it is very possible that you could have a raised bed that you build yourself and fill yourself. Remember, there is that expense in time and labor, for less than $100, for $3 per square foot. If you choose to buy bagged amendments, add it to your own soil, take the time and energy to have a good amended soil, now the cost is going to go up, absolutely. Or like I've done, if you have a bunch of beds that you want to fill all at once, then you get a bulk shipment. You have the dump truck drop a load of soil that's already amended, and you add that to your soil. That does boost the cost of the bed, but not as much as you might think. So for $50 per bed, I can fill it with good amended soil. So that works out to about $2 per square foot. So a basic DIY, basic wooden bed project, you can have for $5 per square foot, which I think is perfectly affordable. The more organics you put into it, the taller the bed is, the bigger the bed is. Of course, that cost is going to go up, but I think that's a good starting point. If you're looking at your garden and you're thinking about the basic wooden beds, it's going to be about $5 per square foot. Now, if you're interested in the metal beds and you want to buy a metal kit and put the bed together yourself, another DIY project, and then fill it, it is going to be a little more expensive. So depending on the size of the bed, what I've found with the metal kits, the steel beds that I've put together, it's closer to $10 per square foot to do it yourself. And that includes the soil that you fill it with. If you go to something like the stone raised beds that I've built, now you're going to get to the other end of the spectrum. And the stone is going to be quite a bit more expensive. That's when you start getting into that $25 to $50 per square foot for a raised bed. So the basic beds in our basic gardens relatively don't cost that much. If you want that permanent structure made out of stone, then yes, you're going to have to pay for it. But nowhere near as much as the internet would have you believe. The website that I was looking at that the AI is referencing when you do the search says that if somebody does the work for you, that it can be up to $200 per square foot. Can you imagine that you have a 32 square foot bed that you would pay $6,000 for a basic wooden box? Of course not. That's ridiculous. So when we talk about these costs, and if you're trying to figure out how much it's going to cost you, talk to a real gardener. Try to avoid seeing what the internet and the AI has to tell you, because you really can get started for a fraction. And Shandy's garden is exactly right. You don't have to buy the wood to make your beds. There's a lot of free options. You can do the discarded kiddie pools, those plastic kid pools that the kids play in for a little bit. And then at the end of the summer, you don't know what to do with. Maybe they're cracked a little bit. Yeah, turn those into a raised bed. You can use buckets and bins to have container gardenings. I have a video that shows how I take pallets and turn them into raised beds. You can use logs, rocks, bricks, all kinds of reclaimed materials can be used to make these beds. And so the idea that you have to spend a fortune, get that out of your head. You really don't. It's just a matter of how much labor that you're willing to put into it and how much time to find these ingredients. And so, like Shandy says, I love checking the scrap and clearance pile of lumber at Lowe's, Home Depot, and lumber yards. Yeah, scraps. There's nothing wrong with scraps. One of my friends, Anita, who's in my garden club, we did a tour of greenhouses in the garden club this weekend, and shout out to Sean, who is on the chat today. And her raised beds are very functional. I actually have a picture of her raised beds in my book when I reference that you can build beds from completely reclaimed lumber. They might not be as pretty as something that you hire someone to do, but they're functional. And that's a big part when we talk about the actual cost of gardening. Something that is functional is usually much less expensive than something that is pretty or is being put into our garden purely for how it looks and not how it functions. So bring that into your analysis as you start talking about or thinking about what you want to do in your garden in particular. Gina says, my beds are built from 2x12 former concrete forms. I've been known to haunt construction sites. That's a great idea. So if you've ever seen how they pour concrete at a construction site, they will take lumber and they'll create a frame, and then they will pour the concrete into that form. When the concrete has hardened, they'll pull off that form. Over time, that wood is more difficult to work with from a construction perspective because it gets coated with the concrete. And so they put fresh lumber for the new forms. That can be an awesome way to add a bed to your garden, because the basic wood that you would buy or that you would reclaim is going to decay in time. But that wood that is impregnated with those little bits of concrete particles is going to last longer. So concrete forms, I love that as an idea for making raised beds, because they will definitely last longer than typical lumber. And if you can find them for free at construction sites, Now you haven't paid anything for the material. It's just the labor and time that you've used to get it. So you can see how actual costs are in direct correlation to what you're willing to do as you do your garden. Tammy says, I'm lucky. I can get pallets and compost for free from our county dump. So what's the cost of that? If you get a pallet and you make a bed like I show in my how to make a raised bed out of pallets videos, and then you fill it using the compost that you pick up at your county dump or whatever area you might have nearby, you add that to the soil, and there is a cost because you had to pay for the gas to drive to the dump, and you had to pay for the gas to get to the site where you got your pallets, and you had to spend the time, but it's nothing close to $10 a square foot for the cheap DIY version that I'm talking about. And of course, the ridiculous idea that you're going to spend $200 per square foot for a bed is just throw that out the window. That's so ridiculous. Even if you have somebody do it yourself, that's just completely ridiculous. But Dean says in Ontario, Canada, Canadian Tire gives away free pallets. And so that's good advice. The idea of getting pallets, I would not recommend going to someplace and paying for pallets because there are many, many businesses that are dumping their pallets. They're putting them out at the dumpster to be carted away. And all you have to do is just go pick up a free pallet. If it's already in the dumpster, just pull it out and take it home. If it's loaded by the dumpster, go ahead and ask the company just to make sure they are throwing it away. But yeah, you can find pallets for free in every town, every city. There's a place that you can find the pallets for free. You just have to take that time to look for it. Red is saying someone at our community garden is using cinder blocks, but upright and planting tulips and daffodils in the open centers going to be lovely next year. Oh, I love concrete blocks. And I've got my video and I showed in the book as well. Concrete block raised beds are amazing. They last virtually forever. And that's exactly right. I've got time that is just exploding. The time that's growing in the openings of my concrete block raised beds is bigger than the time that I have growing in my herb bed. So you can grow a lot of stuff in those openings. And that is kind of falls in the same category as some of that reclaimed wood and some of those pallets. At construction sites, you will often find the cinder blocks, the concrete blocks that are being tossed because they're extra, and it makes it easier for them to just dump them than to cart them back to the warehouse or wherever they get their stockpile. So you can often find cinder blocks as a reclaimed product and make your beds for it. So I love that idea. Rick says creativity, roof sheeting, and some of the cut wood can make garden beds. There you go. I've got my corrugated metal roof panels and wood, and I've made beds out of that too. And so when we start talking about some of these hybrid beds, you can bring that cost of a raised bed even further down. And so my metal and wood raised bed is coming in at about 60 to 70% the cost of an all wood bed, because the metal sheets, those roofing sheets, really aren't that expensive, and they cover a lot of space to form as the sides of the raised bed. So a metal and wood raised bed, yeah, definitely you can get that cost below $5 per square foot for a good size raised bed. So there's just lots of options as we think about what we can do and what the actual cost of the bed is going to be. And we have all kinds of different marketplaces. Rick is saying marketplace freebies. I don't know that one, but so that may be just an Australian one, but there's lots of Facebook marketplaces. There's lots of free websites that will target your local area. spending some time to find it, and then the labor in the vehicle to go pick it all up, and it really can make a huge difference. Jay says, when people in my village tear out old decks and wooden sheds, I get permission to salvage the good wood. Yeah, that's what I did at my last house when we were doing a new deck project, and I tore down the deck and saved the wood. And some of my beds in my garden now actually came from that other house because I had that wood from the torn down deck, and I just brought it to this house to construct some of my beds from the reclaimed wood. The only expense was bringing it here because they're nice. It's nice wood. It's deck wood. So absolutely a great way to do it. Penny says, I built 7 raised beds out of reject boards laying around in a pile inside our sawmill on the property. And I filled them with old cow and horse manure mixed with sawdust from splitting our firewood. So if you are interested in raised beds, this is a lot of people telling you the same thing that I'm telling you, that you can do it. Bettina says, we built our first bed in our new house from the lumber we rescued from the construction burn pile. 6 years and still functioning. So don't think that raised bed gardening has to cost a lot. And I can't tell you the numbers of people that have told me that that's a reason why they don't do raised beds, is because it's just going to cost too much. When they're built, the time that I save just in planning, I've shown that in my videos, the grid, the size of the raised bed makes planning so much easier. And then because I build my beds out of lumber, I can sit on them. And so I don't have to struggle and strain as I work in my beds. So that savings in time and effort far outweighs the time and the effort that I spent in collecting the materials and building the bed in the first place. So it becomes one of those things that really pays itself back. Now, when we talk about the cost, let's say you do choose to pay for your materials, even though there are a lot of these free options. There are 2 different ways to look at the costs, purely as a cost perspective. You look at it as an upfront cost, or you look at it as an amortized cost. So let's say we go to the store, we buy the wood, we buy the materials, and we fill our raised bed. And so we have a medium-sized raised bed, $150. Let's just use that number. And I like higher raised beds, so let's say $200 for a bed the height that I like, that I can sit on and work in. That is a single cost. Like Bettina just said, my beds are approaching 6 years old, and they've still got a lot of years left in them. So $150 or $200, depending on the size of the bed that you pay for, you pay it once, and the bed is constructed. Then you fill it, and you're going to have to amend on a regular basis. So there might be some recurring cost if you buy your compost, which is why I recommend you make your own compost. But what is the real monetary cost of that bed? If you only use it in that 1 year and you never garden again, then it's $150. You paid $150 to garden in that bed. Now, I've never seen a bed last less than 5 years. And I have seen some wood that has broken down to the point that it needed replacing at 5 years. So let's say your bed only lasts 5 years. So what's the actual cost of that if you garden in it for 5 years? Well, that's where we amortize it. So that $150 has lasted 5 years. Now you have spent $30 per year to garden in that bed. That's affordable for most of us. $30 for a full year of gardening in the bed. And when we start thinking about why we have that bed, so if it's a vegetable garden bed, do you think you are able to grow at least $30 worth of produce in a bed per year? And I think all of us would agree that yes. If you have 2 tomato plants in a bed, you will definitely harvest more than $30 worth of tomatoes. If you do the squash like I do in my beds, I'll use my raised beds for squash. I tend to average 30 to 40 pounds of squash per bed per year. Well, if you eat squash and you go to the store to buy squash, you're not going to be able to find squash for less than $1 per pound, but you can grow it for less than $1 per pound. So when we look at the actual cost, there might be a monetary outlay, but think about splitting that over time to really figure out what the actual cost is. And when you look at the materials, particularly if you can get a material that will hold up more than 5 years, basically the cost per year keeps going down and keeps going down. And that's one reason why, even though the steel beds are sometimes twice as expensive as the wooden beds, they're going to last at least twice as long, maybe even 3 or 4 times as long. So while a metal raised bed kit might cost you $10 per square foot to build a bed that's 4 feet wide by 8 feet long, over 10 years, that's going to work out to about $3 per year. But if that metal bed now lasts 15 or 20 years, you can see how that can really drive the cost, the actual cost of gardening, down over time. And if you're using the concrete blocks, the cinder blocks, or if you're using stone, yeah, it may cost in the beginning if you buy the materials, but it's going to last forever. And every year you garden, the effective cost goes down. So that's a big advantage. When I am talking to young gardeners in particular, I'll often advise to start off with a good material, because they're going to be able to garden in it for a long time, and they're going to realize that cost over time, over and over and over again, because they're putting the seeds in, the plants in, and harvesting and getting payback every single year. So that's a part of the cost that I think a lot of non-gardeners don't necessarily think about. It's that payback. What is your harvest really worth? The reason I came up with the idea for this topic today is because of a comment I got earlier this week on one of my videos about hydroponic gardening. And so in one of my videos on hydroponics, I talk about what I'm growing. I'm growing lettuce, and I was doing some peppers and some tomatoes. And the comment was essentially, it's not worth spending that much money just to grow lettuce. Well, if you think about it, yeah, hundreds of dollars for a hydroponic system just to grow lettuce. On the surface, that does sound extreme, maybe even a little ludicrous. Why spend hundreds of dollars to grow lettuce? But take a step back and ask yourself, do you eat lettuce? Does your family have a salad at dinner on most nights? And if it does, then that means you've got to get that lettuce from somewhere. How much of that lettuce are you growing? If you're growing in your garden and you have lettuce as often as you can, typically you can grow it in the spring and into the fall. In the summer, for most of us, it's too hot and the lettuce bolts. So you might have 4 months, depending where you live, maybe you could squeeze it into 6 months where you could grow your own lettuce outdoors. Okay, do it. I encourage you. I know some of you do that. And that's why we have gardens, is to grow our own produce. Now let's come back to the hydroponics. So that means 6 months out of the year, especially for those of us who live in frigid winter areas and we can't grow outside. If we want lettuce during those non-growing times, we've got to go to the store and buy it. And I do that. So I'll buy organic lettuce to make my salads. And on sale, I can buy it for $3 for 8 ounces of lettuce. And 8 ounces of lettuce is enough to make a nice salad for a family for dinner, a single day. So basically, $3 a day for you to have a salad for your family. If you were to grow that same lettuce hydroponically in your own basement, forget that you don't have to go to the store and buy it. Forget that you don't have to pay for the gas for that trip. Just think about the ease of going downstairs and being able to pick your own lettuce and put it into your salad for the night. By not buying it from the store, you are not spending $3 a day. 6 months out of the year, you want lettuce grown in your own house? Well, now let's look at how much savings you've made for a family that likes to eat lettuce. And over the course of 6 months, you are saving more than $500 on lettuce. And now let's compare that to hydroponics. You can get a really nice hydroponic setup for $500. Of course, you can do it for much less than that. But to this guy's comment on my video where he was not seeing why it would make sense to spend that much money for a hydroponic system to just grow lettuce, well, it makes perfect sense. If you have a salad every night, and even if you don't have a salad every night, let's say you have a salad every other night, well, in a year, you can easily pay for the cost of your hydroponic system. And all that space in your garden that you were using to grow lettuce can be used to grow something else. So you're essentially doubling the output in your harvest because you don't have to use that outdoor space for the lettuce anymore. You're growing it all indoors. So these are some of the actual costs as we look at the upfront cost versus the amortized cost. Once that hydroponic system is in place, it's going to last for a long time. So while it might be a savings in the first year, it's going to be a dramatic savings in the second year and the third year and the fourth year. So some of these upfront costs can be worth it when we start looking at the long-term impact that we have in our garden in particular. So that's why I want to talk about the actual cost, because we have to put all of these factors into play when we're talking about what gardening is all about and whether it's growing. Rick is saying some grow microgreens. And yeah, absolutely. My son actually, just this week, just finished a course in microgreens. He had a 10-day course online live, in addition to a lot of videos and a lot of study on growing microgreens. That's what he wants to do, is to grow microgreens, not only for himself, but he actually wants to turn it into a business. So if you get good enough at some of these things, you can definitely do it for yourself, but you can also bring in some income to help pay for some of these other gardening expenses. And so my buddy Jason, I mention every now and then, we have lunch on a regular basis. He does the farmer's market. He's got a nice big garden and he grows to take some of his produce to the farmer's market. He's not a farmer. That's not his primary job. He just does that as a way to supplement his income to help pay for some of those gardening costs, because he's got a big garden and likes to do all the gardening stuff. So if you have that option to bring in some income, take advantage of it. And now the actual cost of your garden drops even more. So many different things that we can look at when we're looking at the cost of gardening, and it makes a big difference. Outlier Gardener, thank you so much for that contribution. I do appreciate you. Thank you. And yeah, thankful for Gardener Scott's discount codes. Actually, I hadn't planned to talk about that, but that's a great suggestion. If you are buying some of these things, particularly the online things, look for discount codes. And I've got a bunch of code, or a bunch of sites, a bunch of partners that if you use the code Gardener Scott, then you can save, and you can see those links in the description below. But Every time you order from Greenstock, you can get $10 off by just using that Gardener Scott code. If you want to buy some of those more expensive things, look at the code below. You can buy stuff from a lot of different sites and use the Gardener Scott code. Save yourself even more money. I always advocate late in the season. So those of us that are approaching fall, I go to my home garden centers on a pretty regular basis now because they're starting to shut down. It's the end of the season. They're just about to make the shift. In fact, some of them already have to Christmas, believe it or not. And when they do that, they got to get rid of all their garden merchandise. Clear out, get those clear out sales, those closeout sales, those getting rid of the inventory sales. Those are great ways to save money. The things that you have to buy, you don't have to pay full price for. If you are using bagged compost, then you know you're going to need bagged compost. Well, you buy it now to use next year. Again, it's one of those upfront costs, but it's for a future use. And I love doing that. I love getting my materials at half off at the end of the season because they're materials I know I'm going to use next year or the year after. The same with seeds and plants. End of season plant sales and seed sales, you can get some of those for next to nothing. You got to act quick because when the sale hits, there's a lot of other gardeners who are probably out trying to do the same thing. But that can bring the actual cost of gardening way down. The plants, almost all of the plants I have in my landscape that I bought as plants, I bought on clearance. I bought it at a closeout sale. I'm trying to think if I've even got a single plant in my landscape that I paid full price for. I can't think of one. Maybe one of my current bushes I might have paid full price for years ago. But most of my plants that I buy, I get at a discount because I wait. I have patience. I don't need to put a perennial plant in the ground when it's flowering. In fact, I prefer to put perennial plants in the ground when they're not flowering. So I'll get perennial plants at the end of the season, the ones that are looking ragged, put them in the ground in late summer, early fall. And then next year, they'll come back with all their flowers and all their growth, and I've spent a fraction of the cost. I do much more starting from seeds, and that's a huge way to save money. So again, getting back to if you do a search online for what the cost of gardening is, and it will tell you that it's going to cost thousands of dollars for you to landscape your yard. Well, yeah, if you watch the shows, and I like watching the same shows on PBS in particular that show the landscaping, they're putting in full-size trees and full-size bushes, and those cost a lot of money. If you got the patience, you can do it yourself. I did the video a couple weeks ago about taking cuttings and growing your plants from cuttings. If you've got a gardener friend, or even in your own yard, if you got a plant and you want more of those plants, propagate it yourself. And it is no cost at all. There is a time cost because the reason those big full-size plants cost so much is because the nursery grew it over a course of years in some cases. So if you've got the patience to do some cuttings and take a few years for them to reach the full size, do it. And it will have cost you nothing. And the perennial plants I have, I grew all my perennial flowers from seed. And now I let those same plants seed and fill out the other area. So the annuals right now, I've got the zinnias and I got the cosmos. They've reseeded. I bought seed once, put those seeds in the ground, they grew into plants, and now they reseed. So I'm getting flowers every single year. And the labor is nothing because I just let nature drop the seeds and sprout wherever they sprout. And the cost is just that initial $3 for a packet of seeds, and it carries on virtually forever. So when we think about gardening that way, if we have that as part of our plan, where we build in the patience, we build in the time as one of those costs, then we can subtract the dollar amount. The actual currency no longer needs to be part of our planning. It's a more, time is the highest cost rather than money being the highest cost. Food Forest Permaculture says, save your seeds is an art form in itself. I go to the Restore and 5 packs for $1. The dollar store has a huge selection for cheap, 10 for $1, and they are viable. Yeah, absolutely. So I showed this in a video a couple of years ago where I talk about the seeds and the viability in particular. And I showed the dollar store. And I do a lot of shopping at the dollar store. You got to be quick. Again, the dollar store typically only has their seeds for a brief period in early spring, and they're snapped up because they're a bargain and they're good seeds and they are viable. The Restore, for those of you who don't know, is like a recycling center that many areas in the United States have. And so you'll have builders that will donate their supplies in a construction project. And you'll have homeowners that donate materials from windows to doors to wood to tile to seeds. There's a lot of stuff that you can find at the Restore at a fraction of the cost. So that's a real good suggestion. And then, of course, once you start with a cheap seed, and it's only cheap in the amount of money that you spend, once you grow that plant, you save those seeds. The plant doesn't know that it's a cheap seed. The Cosmos that I bought at the dollar store for 10 cents are essentially the same Cosmos that I would buy at a nursery for $3.50 for the same basic seeds. And like I said, after that initial outlay of 10 cents, I haven't had to pay anything because I collect the seeds, I let them reseed. In fact, I just last night cut open a cantaloupe. Rocky Ford here in Colorado just has the most amazing melons. And it was so delicious. It still is. I didn't eat it all. And I saved some of those seeds. Now, I don't know for sure what variety the Rocky Ford melon is, but I'm going to grow those seeds next year. I've thought about it in the past and just never acted on it, but now I've got some of those delicious melon seeds. I'll grow them myself and I'll see if it holds true, if it's an open pollinated type of melon, and if I can get the same beautiful melon next year. It's worth a try. But those seeds didn't cost me anything. I'll put them in the ground. The only expense next year will be the space I use in my bed, assuming it's a failed experiment, assuming that those melons don't taste as good because there's some kind of hybrid melon. Well, is it a waste? I don't think anything in gardening is a waste. Yeah, I used some of that space in a bed that could have been used for something else, but the educational cost now is priceless. I know an answer to a question. Can you save seeds from Rocky Ford cantaloupe and grow them in your own garden? Information can be priceless. Look at what you're doing right now. You're watching me talk. You're looking at the comments. You're going back and forth. This information flow can be priceless. If there's a little tidbit that you gain that you carry on into the future, how much would you have paid for that? Now, 20 years ago, when I was active in the Master Gardener program as one of their consulting master gardeners, people would hire us to go to their yard as a master gardener and answer their questions and help them lay out their garden for $50 an hour. I used to think that was expensive. It was expensive 20 years ago. Nowadays, you'd be lucky to find an experienced landscaper or an experienced gardener that can help you set up your garden for $50 an hour. And even if you could find it for $50 an hour, there's probably a 3 or 4 hour minimum to that. So bringing an expert to your garden can be expensive. And if you do the searches online about what the costs are going to be and how to start your garden, you're going to see that as an option. You pay somebody to come out and tell you what to do. Or, like you all are doing, and like I do, you go to YouTube and you watch the videos of the experts and the gardeners who have been doing this for a long time and are willing to make a video like me. How much is it costing? It's not costing you anything other than your time and your effort to sit down and watch a video, or to sit through 90 minutes on a Monday as we share our thoughts and ideas and comments back and forth. So you can see that you can gain so much from the information. I strongly advocate Master Gardener classes. I've taught a bunch of master classes over the years. When I was at the Galileo School, I taught classes to the public every year. They're great. You can get good information by going to a class. You usually have to pay for those classes. And right now in Colorado State University, that runs the extension office, is starting to offer online classes. And a lot of states do that. I saw Oregon, I got a message that Oregon State is doing that, and California State is doing that. Most states have some type of online classes, gardening classes that you can take. You got to pay for those. But often that information, that little tidbit of information that might have cost you $10 or $50 or even $100, depending on what kind of class you were taking, could save you hundreds and thousands of dollars going into the future. So my Master Gardener training was just the foundation for pretty much everything I know now. And I had to pay for the Master Gardener program when I first was involved with it. And that doesn't include the hundreds of hours that I spent in the Master Gardener program. The last year that I was extremely active, I volunteered over 500 hours for the Master Gardener program. That's a lot of time. But what I learned during that time, as I was consulting with people in the community, as I was teaching those classes, as I was volunteering at the help desk, that was priceless information. Priceless information for me. And all I had to do is just devote some of my time to get that information. So how we look at the cost of gardening will vary depending on what is more important to you. If you've got a full-time job and you've got a family, time is probably a pretty expensive resource. And so you really do need to decide how you're going to allocate the time. And the time may be more valuable than the dollars that you have in your budget. So plan accordingly. And yeah, it might make sense to hire somebody. It might make sense to pay for a plan, to pay for the plants that are already growing. Absolutely. Those are the balances that we each have to manage in our gardens. And each of us are going to have a different answer for that. The Wickershire Project says, we had luck with many store-bought melons and peppers collecting seeds. Germination has been okay on peppers and great on melons. We currently are working on apple seeds from store-bought for rootstock. Great idea, and absolutely. And I'm glad you added that little bit on the back side of your comment. And so, give it a try. You can definitely save seeds from the ripe produce at your store. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get, because like I was talking about with the Rocky Mountain melons, they might be hybrids, and the resulting fruit that you grow might not be the same. It might come out differently. But if you've got good luck and now you know, you can keep doing it, and you can save the seeds of the plants that you've put in the ground. The apple seeds in particular, all the apples are going to be hybrids if you save seeds. Apple trees require more than one tree to cross-pollinate for it to get fruit. And so you can expect that the apples you're growing, if you save those seeds, that the resulting fruit is probably not going to bear true to the apple that you got the seeds from. But using it as rootstock is an incredible idea. The rootstock doesn't have to be the same kind of tree. So I've got 12 different types of apples growing in my garden, from Golden Delicious to I'm trying to think of some of the more obscure ones I've got that I just got. I've got some Fuji. I've got a whole bunch of like New England heirloom kind of apples. None of them are growing on that same rootstock. So I've got a Gala apple. The Gala apple is growing on some fruit stock or rootstock that I've never heard of before. It doesn't matter. The rootstock just supports the scion, the cutting above it. And so you can start your seeds, create your own apple tree rootstock, and then just take cuttings from another apple tree and graft them together, and you've got a Golden Delicious or a Gala or a Fuji or whatever kind of apple tree you want to grow. So I love that idea. That's the first I think I may have heard of that. So I may end up stealing that idea at some point and making my own rootstock from the apple seeds from the store. I really like that idea. So you can see how we can get options for how we grow things by just experimenting a little bit. SJK says, thanks for info on sea holly, a new flower for me to investigate. I'm wondering, I didn't see the comment. I'm wondering if Sean was making that comment. In our garden tour, we had sea holly. I just collected from sea holly seed this weekend. So I love growing sea holly. It's a beautiful plant. And the plant itself is prickly. So when we were collecting the seeds, it's not an easy seed to collect, but great idea. And that's one of those things. There were 3 different types of seed that I personally collected on this garden/greenhouse tour that a number of us did this weekend. It's okay. Now, I do recommend that you ask first, but most gardeners don't care. So when we were on the tour and I was collecting some of those seeds, one of my gardener friends apologized because when they came to my garden tour last month, they saw some of the seeds on my flowering plants and collected the seeds. And they didn't ask me first. So they were apologizing. I don't care. Most of us don't care. We are more than glad to give you the seeds from our flowers or our fruits or whatever it is we have in our garden. So take that as a good way to keep your garden going, is to get ideas for plants that could work and find somebody that has that seed and then use that seed. And then you've got more plants growing in your garden. Red says, yes, time is a cost in the equation. I will likely buy tomato cages rather than building my own from cattle panels, no matter that I can build them myself, especially since I can afford them with a new job. Yeah. You can do it. You can afford to do it, but yeah, it might make more sense to buy it. And that's why, no, I've got videos on some of the tomato cages that I have, the big sturdy tomato cages, for exactly that reason. Not everybody makes their own. And if you're going to buy them, then it makes sense to try to find one that is worthwhile and will actually do the job and support the plants that you want. And if you're willing to spend the time, go for it. Absolutely. Jay says, tip, I was able to get 75% of my fruit trees at an end of season sale. Bargain time. I love that idea. So this is where the experience comes into play, because I've done that as well. So I've attempted to grow fruit trees. Oh, there's Molly saying hello. I've attempted to grow fruit trees at end, or that I got from end of season sales, and they just don't do as well for me here in Colorado because, one, my soil isn't that good, but my winter just comes on so fast. And so I want to say 100%. I think all of the fruit trees that I got at an end of season discount that I put in the ground late in the season because they're on discount, they didn't make it through the winter. Or if they made it through the first winter, they didn't make it through the second winter because they just didn't have enough time to get established in my garden. Now, when I talk about those trees, I'm specifically talking about bare root trees because I get most of my trees as bare root plants because I can choose exactly what the root stock is and what the tree is. So for me, buying the end of season bare root tree stock isn't worth it. But if you can find that potted tree that does have the root system already established, that's a way to do it. And I did have some success at my last house where I did that with a fruit tree, where I got a potted plant at the end of season and it grew just fine. So be aware that not all plants are created equally when we talk about some of these end of sale bargains, that you really do want to make sure you've got enough time to get it established in your garden before your winter sets in. Big Will Dog says, knowing I have two 55-gallon trash cans full of compost that's now maturing will feel like cheating come spring. I now have a bigger bin ready to work next year. You know, it's funny you say that, but yeah, absolutely. When you're in that habit of always buying, and then you suddenly start making it yourself, and you've got two 55-gallon trash cans ready for next year. Next year, when you're using your own stuff, it's like, oh man, I took business away from the store. I didn't give my money to somebody else. Now I'll use the stuff I made myself. Yeah, I think that cheating or that guilt only lasts a few seconds, but it's definitely a good option to take, and one I think that you will definitely enjoy because it's fun. I've got a 55-gallon trash can that's almost empty from the leaf mold I made. That's the same thing. Made leaf mold, put it in the trash can to finish decomposing, and now it is just so lovely. So I've got a little bit more left. I'm using it in potting mix for next year, and it's wonderful, wonderful stuff when you make it yourself. And I don't feel guilty at all. And I don't think it's cheating because there was a lot of time and effort to get it to that point. So keep doing it. Definitely keep doing it. Jay Dixon says, tip, I often have to be prepared to baby those bargain plants. Yeah, exactly. And that goes to my point about the plants that you're getting. They might need babying, extra protection, extra care to get them through the winter, or to get them to the point that you can use them next year. And so another cost I wanted to talk about, and you know, it varies by gardener, but it's the tools as well. Think about the tools that you're going to be using in gardening. So when we talk about how much does it really cost to have a garden, we often focus on the beds, we focus on the plants, we focus on the amendments like the compost, whether we buy it or make it, but we don't always talk about the tools and what we use, because we just have the tools, right? We just use the tools, but at some point you got to get those tools from somewhere. I recommend getting high quality tools. It's so easy, especially when you're just beginning and you're trying to save money, to buy the cheap stuff. Nothing wrong with that. My son in particular does a lot of shopping at Harbor Freight. I've done a lot of shopping at Harbor Freight. That's a discount outlet for tools that we have here in the States. And there's some good stuff there. But the stuff I've bought at Harbor Freight, at some point, I had to replace because it wasn't good enough quality to last for as long as I was using it. If you can afford to buy a higher quality tool in the beginning, it's going to last longer. And when you amortize the cost over how many times you use it, it often becomes worthwhile to spend a little bit more to have that sturdier handle, or to have the metal spade or hoe actually built in such a way that the weld doesn't break because you put too much force on it. So the design of the tool, the material that the tool is made from, and the the overall shape and usefulness of the tool, spend some time thinking about it, because that upfront cost may be more expensive. It may actually stretch the budget. I've had a lot of tools that took me a while before I acquired that tool because it needed to fit into the budget. But once you have those good tools, definitely makes a difference. And Mobius has a great suggestion. Heavy duty wood handled high quality garden tools are available at garage and estate sales. And so if you do estate sales or garage sales or yard sales, you'll often find that there's a lot of people out there who dabbled in gardening, or maybe they had a family member who no longer lives with them who was a gardener. And you can find some really nice, high quality tools for a fraction of what you would pay in the store, because you're buying somebody else's tool that they're not using anymore. So absolutely, that's a great suggestion. Highly recommend shopping around and finding some of those kind of options that you might be able to use somewhere. Rick says you need to look after tools and put them in the shed, not leave outside. That's an excellent point. And so when I talk about my tools and how long I've had my tools, it's because I take care of them. I put them in the shed, I put them in my garage. They might be left out overnight because I'm going to use it again in the morning, but that's because there's no rain in the forecast and I know that I'm going to be able to just leave it outside and be lazy. But absolutely, you need to put your tools away. You need to take care of them, and they'll last for a long time. I was watching my son's video yesterday talking about tools, and one of the things I suggested in the comments to his video was a knife, just a retractable blade knife. I have a utility knife, and I've talked about this in a few of my videos, and it's in my pocket most of the time that I'm going out to garden. If I'm doing any tying off of the plants, any trellising, if I'm doing any bags, if I'm doing most of the projects I'm working on, I've got my utility knife in my pocket. And I've had that utility knife for at least 25 years. It's a good, high quality metal retractable blade utility knife. And I still have it. And I've got other tools that are equally as old, a few that are even older. Even my wheelbarrow is 25 years old. I've had to replace the wheels over the years, but it's got the same handles, it's got the same basic structure, and it is far better quality than what you can buy now because they made them better 25 years ago. You can still get some good quality stuff like that that will last, but you're going to have to pay for it, and you're going to have to pay for that extra lifetime. And I think it can be worthwhile, but you have to build that into your budget. You have to build that into your plan of how much your gardening is going to cost. So think about the tools as one piece of it. The upkeep, now here where I live in Colorado, I have to pay for my water. Not everybody has to pay for the water, but the bigger your garden is, the more water you're going to be able to use. You have to factor that kind of cost in it. Now, as big as my garden is, I only pay at the peak of summer about an extra $15 a month in water. So is that worth the cost? Is it worth $15 extra a month for me to have my garden? Well, of course, you know the answer to that question, but that's a cost. I have to account for the water. I have to account for the hoses. You can put that into the tool category where you get a nice hose that's going to last multiple years. Those are some of those things that you have to account for as you think about your gardening expenses. And the big stuff like the greenhouse, you've heard me say this before, it took me 20 years to get my greenhouse, to budget for it, to plan for it. That first year, the tomatoes I had were almost literally $5 tomatoes if I took the whole cost of the greenhouse. But in the second year, when I was growing peppers and tomatoes, well, now those peppers and tomatoes were essentially less cost. And then the third year, and now the fourth year, and I've got figs on my fig trees. If I can harvest figs, yeah, amortized over the years I've had the greenhouse, I'm at the point now where those figs would probably be $2 figs. But I've never grown figs before in Colorado. And so it's worth it to me to spend $2 per fig to have fresh figs that I can harvest. Next year, those figs will be the equivalent of $1 figs. So you can see how even a big item like that, the greenhouse, when you grow in it every year and you keep growing in it, the cost for something expensive like that just gets spread out to the point that it really doesn't matter. And I've got a high quality greenhouse that's going to last me for many, many years. So 10 years from now, those figs will have cost me a nickel to grow, if that. That's one of the ways I like to look at gardening is how much you're spending now, and then how much you're going to be spending for the same thing 10 years from now or 20 years from now, if you're going to be gardening for that long. That can be really important. Shandy's Garden is saying that, again, Gardener Scouts affiliate codes for great products from amazing companies. You won't regret getting a green stock, harvest dried freeze dryer, the hose link, retractable hoses. Yeah, all of that stuff that I've got the affiliate codes for. I've tried out a whole bunch of products that I've never made a video about. I only make the videos about the stuff that I have used and that I think is good material. And the affiliate codes, particularly when you start talking about like the harvest dried freeze dryer, you can save some big money when you use some of those affiliate codes. And if I don't have one, go to someone else that you're watching videos about that product, and you might be able to find a discount code as well. So absolutely a great suggestion when we're looking at saving money in particular. But look at the other options. Backyard Gardener says, I definitely agree. I buy all used tools because they last if you take care of them, except my printers. I buy brand new because I want to get good ones. Yeah, absolutely. And so I might have been talking about pruners. So if you're talking about pruners or secateurs, then yeah, absolutely. Some of those hand tools, particularly with blades, buying them new and then using them for years and years and years to come can be worthwhile to buy that material in the beginning and get the good stuff. So it's up to you, just totally up to you and how you want to approach it. And sometimes you have to look for it. Yeah, Work Assure Project says modern tools and devices are mostly throwaway, non-repairable. This is an awful standard of living. Plus, no one these days cares to understand how to repair anything they own. It's not their problem. And that's why you often have to go to an estate sale or a garage sale to find something that's older. But I agree. The older stuff that you reuse and take care of is often going to last longer than the new stuff that was intended to throw away and buy again. And as long as you look at it that way, the cost of gardening, definitely worth it. And if you're lucky enough, like Wick Assure Project says, you can find somebody that has 50-year-old tools and they're still usable. The drill that I use for a lot of my projects, I've had that drill. It's a power drill. I've had that for 40 years and it's such good quality, all metal, way better than a lot of the plastic drills that they have now. No doubt my son in 20 years or more from now, when I pass on that drill, will keep using it and be able to use it for years and years to come. So it really does make a difference. Jay says, so many good tips from people in the chat, worth a rewatch with pen and paper. So I will definitely do a rewatch on this, and thank you for that, Jay. That's so nice. You know, and I talk about it all the time. Of course, I just love you guys because you are so helpful with everything that you have. And the chat is a great way to get some of that information. I don't have all of the information. I don't have all the experience. And if you were to add up all of the experience and expertise that is in the chat, it's a lot longer than I've been doing it when everybody is added together. So take advantage of that and run through them. I'm scrolling up to see some of the comments, and so it's nice to see what everybody is talking about. Yeah, that's a good tip from Dennis as well. The Master Gardeners in Merced County will be having a workshop on 11 October on tool maintenance and sharpening. And I'm hoping to have this next spring. I started making a video on tool sharpening, and I had only shot half the footage and ended up taking a trip and never finished that video. But if you can find a class and do it firsthand, that's a great idea. And so look to see what your Master Gardeners are doing in particular, because they might have a class on the upkeep of tools and sharpening the tools and how you can maintain them so that they do last for a long time. And that is one of those things that you often need to learn from somebody else. If you're looking for the easiest way to do it, by all means, YouTube videos are helpful. But when you can talk to that old guy who's been maintaining his tools for 50 years, yeah, that's the guy you want to try to find. And if one of those is teaching a class, then definitely take advantage of it and learn some of those tips. So definitely agree that that's a good approach to take if you've got that option. Master Gardener programs are so good because it's just regular people who are teaching those classes. Susan Sewing says, advantage of listening to Gardener's Guide is various perspectives and ideas received not only from him, but the chat too. There you go. So that comment is from about half an hour ago, but like I said, I'm scrolling up to see some of the stuff that you've been talking about. So yeah, take advantage of the chat. Take advantage of each other's information, and you can definitely learn stuff. John Jude says, I built a left-handed Asian garden style hoe for my wife, something we never had seen on the marketplace. That's cool. Now John has the ability to work on and make some tools, but if that, when I say spend the extra money and get those high quality tools, yeah, if you're left-handed and you can find some of those left-handed tools, dive on it, get those, because you may never see them again. So I love that you were able to build a hoe, but those specialty kind of things, too often, and I'm guilty of this as well. I'll see something and I'll think, oh, that's really cool. I really need that. I don't want to buy it today. And then you never see it again. And you spend years thinking about that tool that you wish you had, because when you need it, you don't have it. And there aren't a lot of those tools anymore, because I tend to buy something when I see it because I've had that experience. I'd only use it once or twice and not again for 3 or 4 years. And then when I use it again, it's so nice to have it. Now, yeah, that's a stereotypical man thing, where we have our tool shop and we have tools that we never use. But it's not that we never use them. It's that we haven't used them again yet. But when we need them, they're there and they're ready to be used again. Maybe just one time in a 5-year period, but at least we can just go to the workshop and grab our tools and be able to have it as many times as we want. Big Will Dust says, Gardner Scott, if you're a tinkerer, developing the ability to make use of what others throw away will repay you richly. All it takes is a little perspective. Absolutely. Yeah. And one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? And so there are so many of those things. One of the things, and I've talked about it a couple of times over the years, but one of the best trellises I use is an old bunk bed frame. And it was just a bunk bed frame. But I looked at it and said, oh, that would make a great trellis. Solid metal. I've got it leaning against my garage. I'm not using it this year. I only use it about every 2 or 3 years, depending on what I'm growing. But it's a great trellis, and it will last me for decades. And it used to be part of a bed. So if you're willing to look at things from a new perspective, as suggested, then there's a lot of stuff that you can find out there. And you might need to modify it a little bit. You might need to cut or screw or bend, but you can make it happen. Some of the greenhouses we looked at this weekend, I was looking at Frank's greenhouse in particular, at how he put it together. And it's a hoop house. And he basically used metal conduit and bent it and then covered it to make the greenhouse. And the fasteners that he used to fasten the pieces of conduit together were handmade. He basically just took some of the fasteners and bolts and materials that you would find at the home improvement store and bent them to fit this curved structure that he was making. How easy is that? Well, it's not easy because you have to figure out a template and you've got to make the pieces bend to the right size, but you can do all that yourself. It's all very doable if, like Will Dog says, you can tinker a little bit and you can look at it from a slightly different perspective rather than trying to find that perfectly crafted custom handmade thing and paying for it. Just take what you already have and bend it or shape it to fit. It can be a great way to bring down that cost of gardening. And Sean says the best cost savings I've found is to join your local gardening club. So often you get free seeds, free plants, and most importantly, free advice. Yeah, great tip. And that holds so true in our garden club. So I told you last month we did our garden tour of different members' gardens. This weekend we did the greenhouse tour of different members' gardens. And I was on that tour. So everybody in my club was able to talk to me and I was able to talk to them. And you'd be surprised, even though I might be recognized as the master gardener in the club, and I've been doing this for more than 30 years and people want to seek my advice. Yeah, that's true. But I learned so much by going to other gardens and to see how other gardeners are doing their greenhouses, doing their beds, saving their seeds, choosing their plants. That's priceless. So yeah, Sean is exactly right. You don't have to buy a book. Just show up at a club meeting and listen to the lecture or talk to the other gardeners, and invaluable information. And what's so nice about the local gardening clubs is it's where you live. So much of the advice we get from YouTube is somebody else in some other place, and it might not be appropriate for our unique garden. So find a local gardener and listen to what they're doing, and you might find something that is appropriate to your unique garden because it's your neighbor down the street and they've been doing it for a while and they're willing to share the expertise. So that's a great approach. Look for those clubs. And Rick's right. Gardening is learning for life. I've been gardening for many years, and this weekend I learned new stuff. I take a lot of pictures when I see something new to remind myself, but there's some stuff I'm going to be doing in my garden. You'll see videos with some of the stuff that I plan to be doing, and I got it from somebody else watching somebody else's garden. So get out there and spend some time, spend a little bit of effort, and save some of the other effort that you might be doing because you didn't know about it. So many of the projects I've done over the years were not easy projects because it was the first time I did it and I had to learn it while I was doing it. Once you know how to do something, the second time is a piece of cake. Learning from somebody else who has already done it is a piece of cake. And I've had a number of people from my garden club and friends and family who have walked through my greenhouse, and I've talked about my greenhouse, my planted greenhouse, and there's a link to that below, of course. is one that I spent a lot of time researching. I built it myself, screw by screw, bolt by bolt, panel by panel. And so now if someone asks me about building a greenhouse, I can talk to that. It was hard, it took a long time, but now I know how to do it and I can advise others on doing it. A lot of guys, old guys like me in garden clubs, you just have to seek them out and you might be able to find it. Red is asking random question. Has anyone tried to overwinter their dahlias in the ground? I can't here in Colorado, but if you live in a high enough zone, you might be able to do it. So if any of you have actually overwintered your dahlias, put it in the comments. Those of us that live in the frigid, frozen areas of the country with the deep, dark winters can't keep our dahlias in the ground, but there are some people that can. The plants can survive in areas that don't have the harsh winter. So it is one of those plants that do give you opportunities to save. One of the reasons I don't grow dahlias is because you got to pull them out of the ground and you got to store them and then you got to do all that work. And I will someday, but it's more effort than I want to take right now. So I'm not growing them. But I know a lot of gardeners do. Eli and Kate have got videos on their dahlias and what they do, and they pull them out of the ground every year. So when we talk about gardening and what we choose to do and not do, a lot of the effort is a cost. And I have so much to do that there's a lot of plants I don't grow because of the effort involved. And that's a true cost that I'm not willing to spend just to grow one more plant. So maybe someday. Bettina says gardening is the gateway to so many other aspects of life, like ongoing learning and growing as a person. So true. So true. And Red says, I am here in Colorado, just up the road from Gardner Scott, going to give it a try next year. Saw some people who really mulched them deep with some success. Well, you will have to let us know, Red. Yeah, because if you can do it in Colorado, then I'm certainly willing to give it a try. I'm willing to put a plant in the ground, but I don't always want to take it out. Now, that being said, I just did the video on dividing daylilies. And so there are some plants, and then the next one in that series will be dividing peonies. These are plants you can leave in the ground for years. The only reason you're dividing them is to propagate them, really, and to keep them blooming in new areas. You don't have to divide most of the plants we grow in our garden every single year. And the dahlias does tend to be a regular thing. But if I can just put the dahlias in the ground and not have to worry about them again, except adding extra mulch, I can do that. So thank you for that. Yeah, Jay says dahlias can be overwintered in the ground in zones 8 through 10, where the soil temperature remains above freezing. In colder climates below 10, dahlias must be dug up after the frost. And that's why I don't grow dahlias. But Red, if you can figure out a way to do it here in Colorado, maybe in a cold frame. I don't know if you've been thinking about doing a cold frame. We get so much sun, and that could help keep the soil above freezing. That's a possibility. But again, there's that cost and expense of putting a cold frame around your plants. Could be worth it. And that might be one of those things. And Owen is right. Microclimates are a trend. I've got a couple. So I'm in zone 5B. I've got some definite microclimates in my garden that are zone 6. I have a couple spots that, depending on how I measure it, they're zone 7. But I don't have anything in my garden without all that extra attention, like a cold frame or more, that I would be even close to zone 8, but it's possible. Nikki is asking, what nighttime temperature should I start bringing in my container herbs and lavender indoors overnight? So it depends on the herbs. So most of the perennial herbs, so if you're growing thyme and sage and lavender and oregano, those kind of hardy herbs in a container, then they can handle some cool temperatures. And I wouldn't even think about bringing them in until you're definitely hitting a freeze. If you're growing more tender plants, like basil, for instance, it's not going to like cold at all. So if you start dropping below, say 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 4.5 Celsius, I'd start definitely bringing in those tender herbs. And I would even think about just bringing those in containers, the tender herbs like that at 50 Fahrenheit, 10 Celsius. They'll keep growing much better. The hardier stuff, you can leave them out a little bit longer, but just to be on the safe side, I'd still use that 40 Fahrenheit, 4.5 Celsius is kind of a threshold. And the reason I would do that is because if you live in an area like mine, that might be the overnight forecast. And then you wake up in the morning to find snow on the ground, and it's much colder than that. So it depends on the plants in particular. I harvest my thyme that's in the ground after it snows, after I've had a freeze, because it's that hardy of a plant. So it just depends on which plants you're talking about and as to whether they can handle the cold conditions or not. And many of the herbs that we're growing can handle some cold. The difference when I say about bringing them in, the cold isn't going to kill them, but the cold is going to slow them down, and they're not going to keep growing as much for those hardy herbs. So bringing them indoors, they'll keep growing, and you'll keep getting the new stems, the new leaves, and you might be able to be harvesting herbs for months to come if you move some of those plants indoors. When the season's over, though, when they freeze, then you're pretty much done with it. And so you have to decide how far you want to go into the future to get all of those plants done and keep growing. The tips coming from Jay are fantastic today. Here's another one. Think about your needs and then see what resources are available that will fulfill that for free, or at least for cheap. And so, all of us are online. All of us have the basic skills to do searches. And you're right. Jay is always right. Just figure out how to ask the question for the search to find that resource. Here in Colorado Springs, we have the city that offers free mulch. They don't offer free compost. We have another area near me that's outside of town that also offers free mulch. All you have to do is just do a search, free mulch, and then fill in your city name, and you're going to have those kind of resources that pop up. Because even though the resource near me is a volunteer organization, they've got a website. And the city, because it's a city, it's a little harder to find the information on their website, but it's still out there. You can find those kind of resources just by doing a simple search, and you might be surprised at what you find. There's a lot of places out there, a lot of cities, a lot of towns that have formal programs to give away stuff for free. And then you've got some of those marketplaces. Freebie.com is one that I've gone to occasionally, and it's people just giving stuff away for free. Occasionally, they'll ask you to come pick it up and take it away, but you're going to have to do that anyway if you're going to go buy something. One of the members of our garden club that we looked at their greenhouse, they had a secondary greenhouse that they bought, one of those flimsy greenhouses, and it blew apart. They were tired of chasing down the panels, and so they don't use it as a greenhouse anymore. And they're giving it away to anyone who wants to come and take it apart and take it away. There's definitely some time and effort, labor involved with something like that, but it's an expensive greenhouse. In my area, if you did that, you would need to do some supplemental modification to strengthen the greenhouse so you don't have panels blowing off. But you never know what you might be able to find by just doing a search. And if you're willing to take it apart and take it with you, it could be for free. Well, look at the time. I can't believe how the day passes. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there. Jay Dix and I agree. We so value this community. The amount of information sharing today was amazing. And yeah, you guys are all amazing. You are fantastic. I come back not only to share the information I have every week, but to see you amazing people and everything you have to say. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all your participation, all of your time. And it's not going to surprise you. I'm going to be back to do this again next week with more chatting, more information, and lots more comments. So get out there. I hope you get some good gardening done today and start thinking about the cost and whether it's something that you can figure a cheaper way to do it or whether you want to do more, because that's what it's all about. So have fun with your gardening. And of course, above all, enjoy it. I'll see you next week.